This is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. Welcome to everyone that's getting on the bus. Darren Jolly, as always, is across the table from me.
Hi.
Today, we are interviewing the approval voting party, and we have Frank Atwood and Blake Huber. And are you guys co-chairs, or is one of you the chairman and vice chairman? How is that working?
I happen to be chair of the party, and Blake is definitely, not definitely, how do we word this? Is considering running for national office.
So let's back a bit, Frank. Okay, hang on just a second. This guy, back in 2016, said, Blake, I'm going to run for president. Would you like to be my running mate? And I said to Frank, very seriously, Frank, I can be the president of Vice. I'm in.
and so he's still motivated to run for national office. And we'll push forward and see what happens.
I think that, you know, that's the best any of us can do, is push forward and see what happens. So we'll get to that, like, to where you can talk more about that in a little bit, because we got the short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals of the party, you know, down the list a little bit. But give our listeners, all 7 of them, what the main idea of your platform is.
Well, Frank, why don't you go ahead to begin with? But before we get started, we got to sing the song. So everybody, the wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, very briefly, the approval voting party is pick all you like, the candidate with the most votes wins. It's like show of hands. When friends want to stay friends, they do a show of hands to decide on a movie or a restaurant. And so once again, what approval voting is about is pick all you like, the candidate with the most votes wins.
So that's in essence what I'm sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Continue, Blake.
Okay. So Frank likes to tell it that way. I like to tell it a little bit different way. So we promote a voting method that gives every candidate that's running their true level of support. We'll discuss how that happens in a minute, but just think about that. If you're a non-traditional candidate, an old white fat man with a bald head, that's me, okay? So I could be a traditional candidate. But if you're not a traditional candidate, people who look like you could vote for you. Or if you're a member of an alternative party. And one of my big bugaboos is the difference between major and minor parties, between dominant parties and third parties. That's all bull, okay? I could say bull crap, but I cleaned it up a little bit for you. But anyway,
we appreciate that.
You're welcome. Okay. So when we talk about parties, we talk about corporate parties, because that's what they are. They're owned by the corporations. And we talk about alternative parties. So as we talk through this, we're going to talk about the alternatives, okay? So I really applaud what you guys are doing, trying to get more people to vote. That's fantastic. What we want to do is to have their voice to be heard. So if you're pro-gun or anti-gun, you can vote for all the candidates that are pro or anti, that match what you believe in. If you're pro-choice or pro-life, then you can vote for all the candidates that represent you. That gives the voter more voice and more empowerment at the ballot box. Each time they mark their ballot for all the candidates they like, what they do is they simply take their ballot, and instead of marking just one, that has to be the combination of maybe how they feel that they're trading off on different ideals. They're picking the lesser of two evils, however you want to phrase it. You mark your ballot for all the candidates you like in approval voting. So if you like 5 candidates, you like 5. If you like one, you like one. If you like them all but one, Frank likes to tell this story. I'll let him tell that in a minute. If you like all but one, you can vote for all but one. Now, whatever candidate is marked on the most ballots, that's the candidate that was elected. We win the election because we're able to support our favorite candidates. It's called consensus voting by some people. Frank, you have stories. Go ahead.
Well, my
Go ahead, Frank.
my story begins with me confessing that I'm mean-spirited. And I ask others if they are as mean-spirited as I am. And then I say, let's pretend, pick a year, 2016, and there just happened to be one candidate named Donald and one named Hillary. And maybe you were of the mindset that you wanted to vote for everyone except one of those, and you were as mean-spirited as I am. You have the opportunity with approval voting to do exactly that. Now, the other extreme is, might somebody vote for all the candidates? Sure. If you like all of them, go ahead and vote for all of them. On 2 occasions, I voted for all of them. One occasion was a book club I was a member of. I liked all the books that were nominated. I voted for all the books, advancing all of them and not worried about which one actually won. Another occasion for me, where in a sense I was using approval voting, was a Halloween costume party. I liked all the costumes. I voted for all the costumes. I endorsed them all. Did I waste my vote? I evened it out among them, but I did not waste it. I was able to express myself honestly that I liked all the candidates that I voted for. And in that situation, it was a costume party. So approval voting lets the voter cast his vote for as many candidates as he approves of in each race.
So let me,
He or she gets the opportunity to truly express themselves. For example, let's say you're an alternate party member like a Green or a Libertarian or American Constitutional Party or anybody like that. Okay, so you can vote. Let me rephrase that. I was at the Frank and I go to the Western Conservative Summit every year to talk about approval voting. And this one guy I talked to 4 or 5 years ago, he finally said after 20 minutes of just bouncing things back and forth, he said, I think I get it now. So I can vote for the one they want me to vote for, and I can vote for the one with better ethics. I think that sums it up. If you're Libertarian, Green, American Constitutional Party, Patriot Party, whomever, any alternative party, you can vote for the dominant party, the corporate party, if you so wish. But you can also vote for your favorites. As the alternative party candidates gain market share, more people will tend to vote for them too.
so when I think about like platforms, like you just mentioned all these different parties that you'd be able to vote for, you know, whether it be a presidential election or, you know, whatever, a local election, however that shakes out. Like when we talked to the guy last night, he had a conservative position and a lot of God in his stuff. Last week we talked to the Green Party, so they were talking about the environment. Like your party seems like more of a thought experiment, trying to sort of like draw us into a dialogue socially with trying to get out of being locked into this sort of space. So like say you ended up breaking through and a bunch of people liked you and they voted for you, they appreciated your irony and your sarcasm and your fun and what you're pointing out. Like, is there anything inside of this platform that would be pointed at like any particular issues? Like, I mean, like social security, the environment, education, healthcare, foreign policy, the U.S. economy, or is it more just like rooted in that? And I'm not saying just a thought experiment. I mean, you're just sort of like trying to drive a dialogue forward about the limitations of a current structure with regards to the voting system.
Our
Frank, do you
I
mind if
would
go
like
first?
to,
Oh,
sure,
ahead,
go
please.
first. I'd
Okay.
like to say, in the same way that the suffragette party existed for a couple years to give viability and visibility to the intellectual concept that women deserved the vote just as much as men. Granted, that's our role model of becoming viable and visible. Another group that did not go the party route is the abolitionist party. The abolitionist party stayed a strong faction in party, but did not compete with the Republicans and the Democrats at that time. So approval voting, we want viability and visibility for all parties. And we feel that we can accomplish that best by running candidates with the approval voting message.
So then,
So if you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you think about it this way, and I kind of touched on it in a previous question, if you think about it this way, as a voter, you'll be able to vote for everybody you agree with using approval voting. As approval voting advocates, we're simply trying to educate people, you know, it's your ballot box. Take it back. The corporate parties have owned it for far too long. If you're a green or a libertarian, whatever you are, we want to vote on policies, not personalities, on issues, not individuals. So as you mark your ballot, think about all the policies or issues that you want to support. It's approval voting.
okay, so let me phrase that question Darren asked in just a slightly different way. So you guys are running for president and vice president in 2020, and let's just pretend that they allowed you into the debate. So you guys were up at the podium, and you know, Fox News has a camera there, and C-SPAN or CNN, whoever, right? They're all there. And they say, Frank, Blake, how do you stand on pro-choice versus pro-life, or police brutality, or nukes, or in any number of issues? Do you guys, as the approval voting party, have an answer for that? Or do you just want to break the system and make it better?
I don't think we're breaking the system. I feel we're improving the system by giving people more choice. I think you're now asking in the direction of your fourth question, do we have a steering committee? And if so, how strict is adherence to the party line? And in a sense, I don't feel we don't have a steering committee, although we expect candidates to mention approval voting and not be too controversial. And so we're the important thing is that the message gets out. And I think part of the message of the approval voting party is we want alternative messages from different of our candidates. We don't want a party line from us. This is the idea behind the approval voting, is that you do have moves that beyond two-party thinking.
No,
Blake might want to continue.
And I didn't want to make the word break sound negative. I mean, you know, when you're cleaning a gun, you've got to break it down and clean it, and then it works better after you put it back together, right? Well, hopefully, if you did it right.
We're only making one small minor change to our voting method. Instead of voting for one, you can vote for all you like. Now, if you want to ask me how my feeling is on different issues, then I'd be happy to answer that. For example, on pro-life, pro-choice, on abortion, I would promise people, I will never have one.
That's a good promise, and probably one you could follow through.
Exactly. So we don't take ourselves seriously. We're serious about what we're doing. We were interviewed by National Public Radio in Vail 4 years ago, whatever it was,
Yes.
2016. And we got to talking about things, and we were cutting it up with them because, it's National Public Radio, and we're getting interviewed. Okay, we're in the office, little tiny office, by the way. They don't have lush broadcast office like you guys do. So just a little tiny office. We're all in there together, three of us. And this gal shuts the recording off and says, "You guys are serious." So yes, we're definitely serious. We don't take ourselves too serious. Voting is an issue that really needs to be addressed. And I really applaud you guys for doing this podcast. The research I did on you guys, you want to get more people to vote, to participate, to be candidates. And approval voting lets any candidate that wants to run without shame. Right now, if you're a Ross Perot or if you're a Ralph Nader, you're ashamed because you stole votes from the corporate candidate. I call BS. Okay? We need to take back the ballot box. But I could go on forever, so I'm going to turn it back to you guys.
Let me just ask, so like when, like you, Frank, when you went to Blake and you asked him if he wanted to be your vice president or president of vice or whatever that happened to be, how did that, like for instance, when I was doing research on the approval voting, like I found a group called the Center for Election Science, right?
Yes, yes.
They seem to have a big interest in promoting this position to the tune where like some of the people that I talked about were suggesting that some of the money that's behind trying to drive this forward it functions in relation to the Center for Election Science. I mean, was that part of what helped put you in a position to where you were like, let's do this presidential run? Or what? I mean, how does the candidate sort of like come to be? Like how is that process occurring?
I'm a bit embarrassed to admit that it may have been predominantly vanity. But at the time, 2016, an individual could be a presidential candidate on the Colorado ballot for $1,000 and a running mate and 8 or 9 electoral delegates. And then I realized this is more than my petty vanity. That may have initially motivated me, but to get the message out there and to see if people understood. And then I'm very grateful that Blake ran for Secretary of State in 2022.
2018.
2018, and that turned us into what's called a QPO, Qualified Political Organization. And then when we had 1,000 registered members, we became a minor party. And so there's the classic question of doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Is it still right? And although I may have initially began for the wrong reason, we're doing the right thing. We're trying to move the alternative voting method spectrum to more viability and visibility for third parties, and we feel what is the easiest, simplest method, which is to let people vote for more than one candidate. Transparency.
Frank is giving the highbrow answer. I'm going to give the real answer. Okay. So when we look at over 4 million voters, Am I still there?
Yeah, you're on.
Yes, we can hear you.
So my card just shut off for some reason. So I'm getting it back on. So anyway, the highbrow answer, or the lowbrow answer rather, is with 4.3 million voters in the state of Colorado, and we pay $1,000 to get those voters to see approval voting on their ballot and wonder what that is. How cheap is that per impression? For advertising, that's just an incredible buy.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. And I would probably do it too if I could think of whether or not I'd want to be up like 22 hours a day being, well, it used to be the most powerful position in the world. Now I'm not sure. But if you guys are running candidates, because in 2020 you were on the ballot in 5 states, right?
No, the most we've been on is in 2 states. And that
Because
was
I
in
know Vermont
2020,
and Colorado,
right?
but I swore when I looked at, and I don't like looking at Wikipedia, but I figured you guys actually did it, because when I click on the about from the voter approval website, it took me to the Wikipedia page, and the map was lit up and had like 5 states lit up. Oregon was there, Colorado, Vermont, and there were 2 others. I think Montana or Wyoming. Anyway, I mean, you guys know better than I do, but I just want to let you know that your Wikipedia page might be off a little bit.
Well, maybe we're spreading further than we know. Who knows? Somebody
Exactly.
edited that Wikipedia page. I'll look for the source and see what he meant by it. There are active groups in Texas, in Utah, in Washington State, in St. Louis, and Missouri, I should say. St. Louis adopted approval voting for the mayoral elections, and North Dakota, Fargo adopted it for their municipal elections. Getting back for just a second to CES, the Commercial Election Science, they're the think tank. And they think we're doing things kind of silly. Well, it's just Frank and Blake, and we're having fun. We're just a couple of folks having fun, okay? But we're serious about getting this out to the people. And we could retire at any moment if other groups come along and say this is a good idea, and we need to actually be serious about getting this adopted, we could retire. We really like the idea. I got to tell you, I met Frank probably about 10 years ago. And he's talking to me, this is after the Nader election that went to the Supreme Court. And I'm thinking, we got to do something. Okay, so this is a few years after that. I met Frank at an event, and he was talking to me about approval voting. I said, dude, you're crazy. You have no idea what you're talking about. This will never get adopted. You're wasting your time. Work with me on electoral college reform, because I have some ideas. And he very quietly, if you know Frank, if you've ever met him in person and had a chance to meet with him, you'll understand he's a very polite guy. He suggested I read a book called Gaming the Vote by William Poundstone, who is a relative of Paula Poundstone. That doesn't matter, but he wrote a great book about gaming the vote, how that happens. Now, being challenged, I downloaded the Kindle book that night. 3 days later, I'm math-oriented. I major in college's economics. So I called Frank up about 3 days later and said, Frank, I drank for 2 late. How can I help? So that went from despising the concept and thinking he's wasting his time to actually agreeing with him. And moving forward, we've been doing this for about a decade now.
And I'm forever grateful. Thank you, Blake, because it takes most people, when they first hear the concept of pick all you like, the candidate with the most votes wins, there's an initial reluctance. But quite a number come around, and I see that this is the most transparent, least complicated, easy way to let voters express themselves honestly and get viability and visibility and move us beyond a two-party candidacy and thinking. So thank you, Blake. Always.
Well, you're very
Thank
welcome,
you.
Frank. Very welcome. I think it's a great idea. You can get more people on board. But I'm sorry, guys, we're taking over your show, and it's your
No,
show. So
that's okay. I mean, I like the explanation. The only thing, I mean, because, and I apologize, it just, I think that every time I think I kind of understand, another question comes up. And so now because it almost sounds like you guys are more of a political organization that would endorse independent candidates as long as approval voting was in place, as opposed to a platform, because the only thing that's really on your ticket is to have the ability to vote for everybody, right?
Yes.
that's true. Yeah. But there's a little bit more to that. So if you wanted to run as an approval voting party candidate, we would welcome you. We'd quiz you about what you want to bring up, and we would get a guarantee from you that say, when it comes up, you'll mention approval voting. So if you want to run on the approval voting banner, that means you're a proponent of approval voting because you have no desire to steal votes from somebody else. You have no desire to be a pro or a nader. You have no desire to be shamed because you're in this race supporting the concepts that you truly believe in. So I don't care if you're progressive, if you're a right-wing conservative, if you're a gun nut, which maybe I am, but so I say that in a very kind way. But if you have strong beliefs and what you believe in, you're welcome to the voting party. What we want to do is get people to understand we can have consensus over all these issues, and we can possibly, back in college, actually it was high school, I was introduced to the dialectic, Hegel's dialectic. For the synthesis, you have the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. We want to bring synthesis to voting. That's as simple as that. Whoever's marked on the most ballots, that's the candidate who's going to be elected, and we win.
So when you originally did it in 2016, the funding, you paid the $1,000 then, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So like now, is there more funding behind it now that it's sort of like, I won't say caught fire, but there's a little bit more momentum with it?
Well, I'd say, coming back to your question of how is the party funded, I'm going to say candidates self-fund themselves. And for myself, the party is what my wife permits me to put in for the moment. So it's a limited.
But don't you guys have 1,000 members now, at least?
We've got about 4,000 members now.
And all of those
Frank's
guys
not
paid
about
dues, right?
No, no one pays dues. They can just register. We don't have members, we have registered voters. But we've thought about actually making a membership category. So even if you're not registered in the approval voting party, you could give us $1 for a year membership. And that would bring $4,000 in if everybody registered in the party actually gave us $1. If funding is immaterial for what we want to do, we want to gain attention and get people educated about what approval voting can do for us at the ballot box. If we say send us $1 and we raise $10 million, that means we've got 10 million people that support the concept. If we raise $5,000, well, we got 5,000 people that support the concept. So do we want high dollar figures? That'd be wonderful. But the Center for Election Science, the think tank, they're the ones that really want to develop we want to go around the world, or around the country rather, and so what I want to use, get people enthusiastic about the concept and not incentivize them, but get them to go ahead and start their own parties or their own groups. CES actually wants to finance political campaigns. They can't finance it directly, but they can finance organizations that come up that want to get more involved in that education. We're just one organization.
But that's still very much in the inception phase then. Like it's pretty young.
Well, how long did it take us to get rid of slavery?
Yeah, yeah,
How
yeah.
long did it take us to get the women to vote? We made alcohol illegal and then made it legal again. All these things take decades.
So that brings up another question, and again, I'm just trying to bring some clarity to the voters.
That's your job.
Let's say here in Colorado, because the way that I see it is from a political organization perspective, one of the main problems that you guys are going to have, at least up front, is that in order to get approval voting approved, you are going to have 50 Secretary of States change the state constitution to allow such a thing to happen.
That's not true. Fargo, North Dakota has approval voting for municipal elections. So does St. Louis. We need to have more cities adopt approval voting. Now, a lot of folks want to do top down. They want to have petitions, go out and get everybody sign petitions to force everybody to look at approval voting and consider it for themselves, for their state, for example. So there's other types of voting methods that have gone out and done that. And now there's pushback on those systems, those methods. We don't want to do that. We want to go very slowly, get it one city or two. We want to get a couple cities here in Colorado. There's issues like if a city has 3 counties that that city overlaps in, then there's coordinated elections. So it's not an easy process. It's pretty complicated. But if we can get a couple of home rule cities in Colorado and get that data and take that forward, and we're going to talk about long-term and medium-term goals here in a few minutes, but we need to get that data to be able to show that this is a viable alternative voting. You want anything, Frank?
No, I think that what you are correct about each state controls its own election method. But at the same time, states that have home rule cities, which are quite a number of Western states, those home rule cities, depending on what their charter says, can implement approval voting.
Just why I voted the city council,
Yes.
or if they
and
have an
that's-
election commission. The
That's
election commission.
important too, because of, I mean, you can have a county vote that affects your mill levy on your house. You can have a city that's going to try to implement a new sales tax. So I understand that local elections are absolutely important, and maybe I need to do more research into it. But I mean, how many cities are we talking about throughout? You said mostly in the West, Frank? You know
Mostly
how
in the
many-
West, home rule city. I'm not certain how many states, but it's going to, as Blake said, this is going to, for respectability, needs to start at the grassroots level and move up. With Fargo, North Dakota as being the first one to have done it. Subsequently, St. Louis, Missouri, and see what happens. I think we'll see what happens. You push forward. What is surprising is 70% of, in round numbers, 70% of registered voters want to see third parties. Yet only, pick your percentage, 2%, somewhere between 2 and 4% actually vote for third party. Why and how do we see that dichotomy? And the reason is because current system has a single precious vote, and if you don't cast it for one of the legacy / corporate parties, you find yourself sabotaging them and becoming part of the next Perot / Nader shamed individuals. And approval voting gives third parties the opportunity to be both viable and visible.
Can I just one thing, like Blake, there's something you said a minute ago that sort of rubs up against this. So like obviously like ranked choice has been something that's being discussed in a number of different jurisdictions. What makes approval voting better than ranked
Nothing.
choice? Nothing?
Nothing.
Okay,
So,
so you like it
approval
because
voting is good for some people, and ranked choice voting is good for other people. There's a mindset where I have to rank things. I have to make discrete decisions between first, second, third, fourth. And there's a mindset that, well, I want to rate these people. I can rate 3 candidates 5 stars, just like you do your Uber driver. I can rate 3 candidates 5 stars, and I would mark those on my ballot. I might rate another candidate or 2 4 stars, and I would probably mark them on my ballot. But if I rate them 3 or below, I'm not going to approve them on my ballot. With ranking, I have to decide, and some people like to do this. I'm not saying anything negative about ranking, but you have to decide. He's first, she's second, he's third. And I don't see, from my point of view, approval voting gives each candidate a true level of support. Not a contrived level of support, not an elimination process to see who remains, who's the last one standing. That's not the concept we want to put forth. Some people love ranked choice voting, and I'm not disagreeing with them. I just like approval better because I'm the kind of person that doesn't want to put people in buckets or in stat rankings like corporations do when they want to fire somebody. I don't want to do that. I want to say, can we vote for somebody positive? Can we all just get along? We all come together about 1 or 2 or 3 candidates. I want to bring people together, have a consensus candidate, actually take office. And then we can also be voting for people. I keep saying this, okay, and I'll keep repeating it, but I want to be able to vote for people. I want everybody to be able to vote for the ones they like. Now, you want to talk about issues? We can talk about issues. I have my feelings. Frank and I have come together what we see as a most desirable candidate, what issues they would like. But we don't want to box candidates in. If they want to do something else, if we're libertarian or whatever conservative, and they're progressive or whatever liberal, then that's cool because they're expressing themselves and they'll get their own level of support under approval voting. Have I answered your question?
absolutely, yes.
So I don't want all of these questions to be follow-up questions. It just happened that I had a lot of follow-up. But, you know, we've kind of walked around the question number 6 a couple of different times. And
Not
it,
yet.
you
Yeah,
know,
we got goals.
you guys talked about the home rule states, and I mentioned the Secretary of State thing and whatever, but what do you see? And you mentioned that it takes decades for change to occur. So what are the approval voting parties' short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals for the party?
So we've got a list. Do you want me to list them, Frank?
Well, first, what I'd like to say is the immediate goal is not to get kicked off this podcast by you folks and get kicked off the bus or kicked under the bus. So,
We don't want to get
so-
kicked off the bus. Yeah.
Since we forgot to tell you that
So-
we don't allow sarcasm on here, we're just gonna let it go. So,
okay. I think as short-term goals, we want a clearinghouse for our advocacies of alternative voting methods. We also want a campaign to inspire advocacy. We're trying to help set up groups nationwide to talk about alternative voting methods. And also, our immediate goal is to create a speaker bureau and order to talk with individuals about the concept of alternative voting method. And so I think it's the immediate exposure for people to hear that there is a different ways to vote for candidates. And some quite often people have heard about ranked choice voting. I find approval voting to be an easier, more transparent way of voting. We want people to have choice, alternative.
So let me go ahead and read the midterm goals we came up with. We want to get approval voting. We want organizations within the community. This is not just a voting method. We want to get organizations in the community to adopt and elect their leaders, like the PTA, HOA, clubs. We want to get them to adopt approval voting and electing their leaders. Okay, we got 5 people running for president of the Optimist Club. We want those people, again, to get their 2-level support and we be able to mark that ballot for multiple candidates. We would love to see the corporate parties, the Democrats and Republicans, use approval voting in primaries. And this has been an initiative we've started. We're getting some buy-in, but not a lot. Some people are very skeptical about changing from a 2-party system with a single vote. There's a French mathematician named Duverger. It's spelled Duverger, but it's pronounced Duverger. And he had the concept, it's a law that he came up with, that if you have a single vote in an election, you'll always have 2 dominant parties. So we want to get people to use approval voting in primaries to pick their consensus candidate. The candidate truly represents the rank and file of the party. We would love to have legislation allowing statutory cities, not home rule cities, but statutory cities to be able to adopt approval voting if they want to. And we're looking for municipalities to adopt approval voting. And what's our long-term goal, Frank?
Very simple. Go global.
So
That's
once,
simple. Well, saying those 2 words is simple, but
yes, well, once we have the data, and once we have a number of cities, whether that's us or Center for Election Science, once we have enough cities that enjoy using approval voting and see the value of it, then we want to be able to take this to other places in the world that have single seat elections for mayor, president, whatever. France has a president, they have a parliament as well. We want to be able to introduce them to approval voting to see if they can use that to elect their leaders.
okay, I mean, those goals were very straightforward. I definitely can see that happening. You know, you
Now,
mentioned,
the next question you asked is, how are we going to do that?
well,
That's why we're here.
kinda, I was gonna ask because I see like a problem with, okay, so on your website, you do a blueberry, a peach, and a squash, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So let's say that there's a vote and that first vote, you know, it turns out that 35% of the people voted for the blueberry, 35% for the peach, and 30% for the squash. So now the squash is out and the stone fruit and the, I don't know, berry are tied. So do you have a runoff election at that point? How do you end up picking who takes the seat?
Okay. So I'm going to answer your question very simply. In all the straw polls we've held over the last decade or so, we've never come up into a tie. Ties can happen. I would handle ties now. In some communities, they flip a coin. In some communities, they have a runoff. So that's going to happen, maybe. But it's going to be seldom, as seldom as it is now. We had over 15 people run for mayor in Denver, where I happen to live, in this last election. If we'd used approval voting, we would have had one candidate probably getting 60% of the vote. And another candidate may have getting 59% of the vote. And the others may have gotten 40 or 50 or 30. We wouldn't have two top contenders and a bunch of one percenters like we do now. And that's more important than, well, what if we have a tie? Yeah, that's going to happen, but we'll handle that. We've done, like I say, polls for the last 10 years, and the closest poll we had was 60-59. And I think that was on, what's his name, the physician that ran in 2016. Ben Carson. Ben Carson, and was it Trump Frank or was it DeSantis? Oh no, it was Ted Cruz. I think Ben Carson and Ted Cruz were virtually tied. And when you could only vote for one, they were virtually tied. I think Ted Cruz beat them by 1%, 1 percentage point. When people were able to truly express themselves, Ben Carson won hands down, and Ted Cruz was 2 or 3 percentage points behind Ben Carson. But the key, there's two things. The key here is Ben got 60% of the vote, and down tickets, you would see what's his name, Jingle.
Kinsey.
He was marked on 50% of the ballots. Former governor of Louisiana, Jingle. I'm sorry, I can't think of his first name right now. But the key is he's not a loser because his true level of support was 50% of the ballot. So what's more important, to have a clear winner where we don't need a runoff and impose rules, unnecessary rules on the voting public, or allow the voting public to truly express themselves and just see what happens.
What if anything, have you heard from the two dominant parties? Like, I mean, how are they responding to these spaces?
Frank?
I'm going to say on that, the Democrats, who, let's face it, Colorado is a blue state. The Democrats don't want to change, and the Republicans are a bit reluctant and suspicious. And I'm not surprised that the major parties are the corporate major legacy parties have that position. I'm grateful that I believe both the Unity Party and the Libertarian Party and the Approval Voting Party are all advocating for approval voting. And for the Libertarians, it's in their bylaws, and for the Unity Party, and Approval Voting Party, it's also bylaws. And I think if we once again have as miserable a choice as we had in 2016, I think the concept of alternative voting is going to get more of a boost from the general public.
Yeah, I mean, it's so curious. I mean, obviously, part of the reason why we're doing this is it's not just the voting thing; it's bringing a lot of these dialogues out into the open. We
appreciate that.
It doesn't matter who ends up being in those spaces, but I will not vote for either major party this time, no matter what. I can't. I'm just so irritated about everything that I'm seeing, because we need some, like, even like what I get concerned about in spaces like this is that it turns into sort of like a catharsis, right? Like where I like say I lean left, right? So I vote for Biden because I just despise Trump, but because I like, I had to read Cornell West when I was a graduate student, and I love the way that he kind of speaks. I'll vote for him, but I know it's not ever going to amount to anything. You know, that's where I get nervous in these spaces. But I think that no matter what, we have to start at least toying with like processes, like what you guys are talking about. Otherwise, we're just doomed to repeat, and we know exactly where that's going to take us. It's going to take us in a place that's going to look a hell of a lot worse than January 6th, 2021.
If you
Yeah.
keep doing the same thing you've always done and expecting a different result, what does that make you?
The definition of insanity, sir.
There you go.
Thank you.
Not sure. I'm Blake, but I appreciate it. So seriously, we need to change. We need to change now. Now, can we do this top down? Will we force it on people? No, we're going to get some pushback on that. If we let people know, for example, let's try you're trying to schedule a meeting. You want to have a meeting at a certain time, certain day, and a certain time of day. Okay? You create a ballot with all the days of the week. You create a ballot with the hours that you want to meet, whether it be 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever. And you put those all on a ballot. And everybody involved in scheduling that meeting vote for all the ones they prefer. Now, Frank might vote for all of them because he wants to be accessible. Other people might say, you know, I prefer this day over this day. Everybody gets their voice. Everybody is empowered. And you make the decision based on the consensus. What options were marked the most? So again, it's that simple.
So since you guys are in the we'll call it a growth stage, who out of the two of you, or who's doing like the reach out to talk to the Libertarian Party and the Greens and all of these other parties to, you know, get your message out there so that more people will know what it is you're trying to do and how you're trying to change the voting process here in the United States?
Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the most part, Frank gets involved in fraternal organizations. He's just a nice guy. He gets out of it. People see him. He talks about approval voting with those people that really picks up the message. I'm more politically oriented, so I'll go to a Green meeting. I'll go, in fact, there haven't been many lately, but I'll go to a Libertarian meeting. That's where I was tonight before we got on this podcast. So I'm more of a political animal, and correct me if I'm wrong, frankly, you're more of a club type person that wants to introduce it to people of that.
I both Blake and I attended the Western Conservative Summit, which is turned out to be quite open to the concept of alternative voting methods, and actually used approval voting in a straw poll to see how candidates felt, not how candidates felt, how their voting population felt. I've been going to Optimist Club meetings, and Blake's been to the Libertarians. You get out there and find people where they are and who's open to the concept. Blake and I went up to Adams County and talked to some Republicans up there. It's wonderful to talk with people. At the same time, it's very frustrating, but it's moving the ball in the right direction. And if we want to move beyond third parties and give viability and visibility, we need to go with something different than what we currently have. And the most easy to implement is approval voting. Pick all you like, the candidate with the most votes wins.
And that's why we're on your podcast. We want to draw attention to it. It's not for everyone, okay? There's a specific type of person that alternative voting methods would appeal to. That's people who support alternative parties. That's people who think that They just don't want to vote anymore because their vote really doesn't mean anything. They feel their vote is wasted. In Kansas, where I grew up, if you voted Democrat, your vote was wasted because you knew a Republican was going to get elected. So the swing states were the only ones that have the most power. They get the most attention. What if every state was a swing state because you could truly express yourself? So like I said, it's not for everybody, but there's a specific, and we're trying to find that specific group of people that are so frustrated with our current system, they're looking for some alternative that would actually work. That might be you guys, maybe.
I'm pretty sure it's at least half of us.
Well, good, good. We're
Thank you,
making progress.
thank you.
So are you guys, do you have any candidates slated for the upcoming election, whether that be local in Fargo, in St. Louis, in Vermont, here in Colorado? Do you have anybody on your slate, and what are they running for in 2024?
I already mentioned that I have intentions of doing something in this election cycle, but I'm not ready to make an announcement. Okay. Once you make an announcement, there's laws that come into play. Don't want to deal with that right now, but within the next couple of months, I may make an announcement. And you may call me up and say, Blake, we'd like to interview you when you make after you make the announcement and talk about what issues you want to bring up.
And then I'm assuming we can also find that information on the approval voting website. Any
Absolutely.
candidates that are running under your banner?
So keep in mind, though, as we're governed under minor party rules as an alternative party, we announce our candidates at our convention, which is usually March, April, May every year. And every 2 years, I think it's even numbered years, we actually nominate candidates. So even though a candidate may want to run as an approval voting party candidate, that won't be cemented until we have our convention. Just like with the Republicans and Democrats do it the same way. They have the presumptive nominee.
So this might be self-evident, but we'll just hit the last question anyway. So what would you change in the current political process right now to make it better for voters, candidates, and parties?
Right.
Go with approval voting in order to minimize voting for the lesser of two evils. No shame for voting for an independent candidate. No shame running as an independent candidate. Minimize the vote splitting and spoilers in election. Moves us beyond two-party thinking. Emphasize issues, not individuals. Emphasize policy, not personality. Approval voting, we like to believe, will accomplish those objectives. And approval voting, the simplest, easiest way to accomplish it on the ballot. The instructions change from vote for one to vote for all you approve of. And I think you're almost on an exact hour here. Yes.
Yeah, we timed that pretty well, but I mean, we don't have to cut it off. And I was going to tell you that you guys have an opportunity to give your statement one more time, tell everybody where they can get a hold of you if they want to, like if they want to say, hey, Blake, Frank, I want to run under your umbrella, or here's $50 or whatever.
Well, we welcome all to call our hotline, and it is 720. I always get this wrong. Just a second. Frank, go ahead. I'll look it up.
No, I let Blake handle my the technical side here, and I'm
the website is approvalvotingparty.org, right?
.org, .com, and .net. We covered them all just so somebody could steal it from us. So just Google Approval Voting Party, or call us at 439-6000. And if nobody answers, leave a message. You can also text us. We'll respond as quickly as possible.
Very cool.
One
Yeah,
of the things that you mentioned is you wanted us to rate some issues. Can we go back and do that real quick?
absolutely. I just kind of skipped over it because I wasn't trying to be rude. I just made an assumption. And you know what they say about an assumption, you make an ass out of you, an assumption.
Okay, so let's just talk about what we rated. You gave us, I think, 7 different
Yeah, it was Social Security,
6 right.
the environment, education, healthcare, foreign policy, and the US economy.
Okay, so let's take those in order. The one we thought was most important was education. Right now, the unions and the teachers are all getting together and saying, we need more money, okay? And then they send a tax bill to me to pay for whatever our elected leaders decide, okay? So what I want to do is I want to put, if we had a candidate, this is the perfect candidate, a candidate that came along and said, I want to create an educational savings account. So I'm an old fart, okay? I'm in my 70s. So I pay my taxes, but if I wanted to actually make sure that teachers were rewarded for what they do, why not create a tax deductible account where I could put $1,000 or $2,000 in this tax deductible account, call it an educational savings account or any other name, and then I direct those funds to go to an individual or to a school district. As a voter, as a taxpayer, I put this money in, I get a tax deduction, and then I direct where it should go. Maybe that goes to a student who needs supplies. Maybe it goes to a school district or a group of teachers or an individual teacher. So the second thing that we felt was most important, as Frank and I talked about it, was the U.S. economy. And in the U.S. economy, we have so much regulation. If you want to be a hairdresser, or if you want to be a barber, or any one of a number of things, you have to go through a licensing process. And studies have shown that most of these licensing processes will limit competition. So the people get in first, get the licenses, then they make the license structure harder to keep competition from coming in. So we can reduce that kind of regulation and abolish licensing. The third category that we were looking at was foreign policy. And Frank and I decided that the perfect candidate would be a candidate that would do things like want to end tariffs. Tariffs don't punish people who want to import things. They punish us as consumers. So if a candidate says, I'm going to increase tariffs across the board 10%, guess what? Everything we buy from a foreign country, from people that are trying to make a living and a people in an area where they don't have as much of an economy, a robust economy as we do, they're trying to make this money and send these goods to us. And then we put a tariff on it. We pay the tariff. They don't. And we limit how much these people who are living in destitute, I'm talking about Africa, Latin America, parts of Asia, where these people are making things and making $5 a day. We put a tariff on it. And tariffs also hit people who have the least amount of money the most. There's a really great podcast I just listened to about why we can't have nice things. He talks about how tariffs truly hit us the most. Going on to the next issue is Social Security. Now, you may consider this controversial, but what Frank and I decided a perfect candidate, or a really good candidate, will be a candidate that is for open borders. We want immigration. We want people to come to this country. We want them to solve the Social Security crisis by making money. They bring one mouth and two arms. Okay, so they come in here, they participate in our economy. Within 3 generations, they are what we consider American. Okay, they would adopt our culture. Many people around the world want to imitate us anyway. Why not just let them come in, work, and make money and pay taxes and lower the problem with Social Security. The last issue we talked about is environment. And there would be a way that approval voting could be used to divvy up the pie to solve environmental issues. What's most important? I talked to an HOA president several years ago. I wasn't there presenting. She just was talking. I mentioned approval voting. Everybody's heard me say this ad nauseum, so they didn't want to hear me say it again. But she was interested. She was the president of an HOA. And she said, I use this. I make a list of things we want to get done in the next year. I have all of the people in the HOA vote on these issues, approving, putting a number, scoring, ranking, rating rather, any of those things. So I know which issue, which project has the most support, because that's the one we tackle first. And that about sums it up.
And,
That
and
was
I would,
the quickest way you or anybody has answered number 2 so far.
Okay.
Like you just
And-
blazed right through that.
and I would like to say this is the idea behind approval voting parties, is that we want candidates with alternatives to state them clearly. And as long as they also endorse approval voting, yes, we're a big umbrella party.
So
We really want to drive consensus. So if somebody comes along, like open borders, that's controversial, okay? But
Yeah.
why not bring the concept up? So if I were, for example, if this candidate, let's say it's me, but if this candidate were to get votes where someone actually awarded the candidates with their single precious vote because of the stance on open borders, fantastic. What if we had 3 people talking about open borders, or 3 people talking about how we fund environmental issues? By the way, I drive a Tesla, okay? So you know how I feel about it. But I don't want to force it down other people's throats. I do everything I can to recycle, etc. But we're not talking about me. So let's get back to the questions at hand. But controversial subjects should be brought up. And if candidates get their true level of support, we're going to see which of those issues, which of those policy concepts have the highest level of support, the broadest popular support.
that all makes sense to me. You kept saying if we had the perfect candidate today, this is the way that they would answer these questions, in this order. Sorry.
You gave us a question, we had to answer it, so this is what we came up with.
No, I appreciate that. My only follow-up on that one was gonna be, so if I called you guys tomorrow and said, Blake, Frank, I want to run for governor of Colorado or
Sweet.
mayor of Denver or whatever.
Okay.
Do you guys have any support mechanisms built into the party for the candidates that are
At
running?
this time, no. At this time, no. Okay.
Okay.
We would support you with volunteers, perhaps. We could possibly do some fundraising for you. But I think the biggest thing is every time you said approval voting, we'd be right out there with you saying, see what he said? So we don't need this crap that we have now. We need to take back the ballot box. I'm sorry, I keep repeating myself, but damn it, it's our ballot box. And the reason we don't have approval voting, right now are the power brokers, the money men and women who want to control the election. We've gone from only white landowners could vote to all men could vote, then to all men, even men of color can vote. And now we have women can vote, but they tell us who to vote for. I'm sick and tired of it.
And they listen.
So on that note, then like the suffrage party or like the abolition parties back in those days, if we graduated to a place where we had a more dynamic social space in terms of how we enacted in relation to elections, both from local all the way up to to federal, then this approval voting party would transform into something else then, pretty much, like, kind of like those parties back then, right? Because this is the
Yes.
mainstay of everything that you guys are doing.
Totally so. But we'd retire pleasantly and successfully.
So how many prohibitionists have been elected? Maybe a handful. How many suffragettes were elected? I don't think any were. But they pushed forth a policy. If we had approval voting back then, they would have gathered more momentum more quickly, because the corporate parties would look at the market share votes that these alternative parties are getting, and then in what's the word I want to use? They would
Co-op.
then take co-op the party. Yes, they would imitate the party. They would imitate the Libertarians and the Greens, and the policies and the issues that these minor parties, if you want to call them that, the alternative parties, they would be co-opted. The Overton window, everybody knows what that is, would then slide down to fit those issues. If you care about issues, you care about approval voting.
I want to
If you
get
want-
political pundits to not say the Overton window anymore. I want to get a substitute term for the Overton window.
The Green Party people love to talk about the Overton window.
There's a lot of people who do, yes, but
The point, well, yeah,
Okay.
of course, you got to move the frame through which, what's possible, what can be talked about, what we can think about. That's-
Exactly.
you mentioned a party, and Frank was asking, what's the name of the party again?
It
Talks about
was
the-
the Green Party people
Oh,
talk
okay.
about it a lot.
Oh, okay.
So
Or
what I
maybe-
want to see
Maybe
is
two times as
broadest,
much.
broadest popular support. If you want to take anything away from this podcast, and I said over and over again, we want to elect people that have the broadest popular support, not somebody who leads the largest faction in their party. And we saw that in 2016. The largest faction of one particular party was a person that got elected, and many people think he should never have gotten elected. Mexico, for God's sake, Mexico has two women running against each other.
Pretty
And
crazy.
one of these women is going to be the president of Mexico. Why can't that happen here? Every industrialized country in the world has had more representation than we. Just a bunch of old white old farts like me get elected. That's a traditional candidate. Sorry, I get excited.
No, that point about Mexico is super. I mean, when you look at the US and how inflexible we are, and you look at something like that where we perceive that externally like to be stuck in certain spaces, but quite the opposite is true.
Right.
Those points need to be addressed. We need to see ourselves honestly for what we're not doing as much as what we are doing. So
One last thing I like to talk about with approval voting is who's going to run next time. Okay. Let me tell you a quick story about Lucy the librarian. Okay. Frank's heard this many times, and he's probably going to tell Blake again. So Lucy the librarian is in her 40s now, and she wants to run for mayor, but Bob the banker has been very popular. He normally gets 80% of the vote. Now, Pete the plumber, or Paul the plumber, I get in trouble. Sometimes I use Peter, Paul, and somebody, oh, that's me. Oh, I'm very careful about that. But Peter, Paul the plumber, he always runs because he wants to advertise his plumbing business. Everybody knows you got a plumbing problem. Call the plumber. Call Peter, Paul, whatever you want to call him. To call him because he's excellent. But as an administrator for a city, getting to know people and getting to solve issues and bringing people together, Pete's gonna fail. Okay. So Lucy has a bucket of issues, and she's done research because she's a librarian. And so she tells Bob, the banker, who's the mayor, she said, who is looking to possibly retire, but he doesn't want Pete to take over because that will be catastrophe. So Lucy does this research, finds out about approval voting, suggests it to Bob, the mayor, and says, we should try this. So the next election cycle, Lucy puts her name in the hat. Bob is always on the ballot. Pete should be there. you just watched it, and they do an election. And Bob always gets his 80%. And because it's number of ballots instead of number of votes, which is the same thing when you mark 1 on your ballot, or you mark 5 on your ballot, it's a number of ballots. So Lucy gets 60% approval on approval ballot, and Paul, whoever, he gets his normal 20% of the ballots marked for him. Because people just, they don't want to vote for Bob. Maybe Bob did something to him. But anyway, so he's got some negatives. So anyway, then Bob the banker decides, oh, I can retire. Lucy and I agree on most everything. She's younger, but she's got some ideas that are more youth-oriented than mine are. But I can retire now because Lucy is going to take over my legacy. Wouldn't it be a wonderful world where we knew, time tested, a person who ran and didn't get 1%, but they got 20 or 40 or 60% of the vote, where the person who got elected got 80% of it? Then we win. The candidates don't win. We expressed ourselves. We chose the people that we want to see in leadership positions, and it's as simple as that. And the broadest popular support gets to get elected.
Well, I like everything you guys have said. I mean, mainly because it will hopefully stop the Demo-Publican vote. And, you know, just shine a big magnifying glass to how fucked up the system is right now. But that's my opinion.
I'm gonna just excuse me for a moment. I'm going to make a disclaimer that I feel that I'm afraid coalitions and political parties are inevitable, and that there's a certain amount of hegemony that takes place of dominant coalitions and dominant political parties. And they'll still be there. But what I suspect will happen is that we'll have 2, 3, or 4 fairly dominant parties. We might have another half dozen special interest issue parties that will let voters express themselves more. And it will be healthier for our democracy to have those choices and not locked in on the duopoly that we currently see.
I've been a state chair for an alternative party back in the 70s, 80s, somewhere back in there. I forget. It's too many years ago. And our philosophy was not to get elected, but to influence the people who do. So what better way to influence the people who actually get elected, get the nod, but by running and showing how much support our ideas have.
Well, guys, I appreciate you being on the show. Hopefully we can stay in touch and find out how approval voting is going, you know, over the next, I don't know.
We'll keep an eye on you in the spring when the commitments come out. So
When we have our
Yeah,
convention.
that's great.
Yeah, and
Brian and Darren, thank you.
If you
Thanks for
decide
having
to
us on,
talk
guys.
again, let us know.
cheers.
Okay.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, guys.
Have a
Thank
good
you
night.
very much, both. Super. Good night. Talking later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.